Talk Live. So as I wait for people to filter in, I will go ahead and make sure that this is all situated here. All right. Okay. So, for this Wednesday, November 27th, as I am doing this live right now, the current zodiacal wheel shows us at Capricorn rising in Jupiter's hour, Mercury's day. Should be a somewhat auspicious time to do a live in the pursuit of wisdoms and divination. So, that should be fun. All right. So, let's see. As far as announcements today go, I have just finished packaging the first batch of the Children of Ostara Kickstarter orders out. So that's fun. I think we stayed up late and got about 74 packages done and ready to be shipped. So those are going to go out today, hopefully. And then we have plans to work late into the night on the second batch fulfillment. So that should be good as well. So yeah, so our first batch, we got 74 done last night, all packaged and ready to be shipped. I'm hoping we can get another at least, I'm really hoping to get 100 per session finished. So we've got quite a few Kickstarter orders to go through, but we are making progress, so that's good. We finally have enough of everything to start actually shipping orders, which is exciting. Very, very, very close to the end of the year and the holiday season, so who knows? Hopefully we can get that done by the end of the year. Anyway, so welcome to my Witchy Wednesday Tarot Talk Live. If you want to go ahead and pick a deck to work with, we have the Children of Ostara, the Children of Litha, and the Nameless One. And then as a special treat for anybody interested, afterwards I think I'm going to use my Witches Runes Divination coins. This is my nice Divination Charm mat, and I think I might do a little charm reading, which could be fun for, I don't know, for whoever's interested, just a little demo. So yeah, I think that's basically all of the updates that I have. I mean, Kickstarter is going to take a long time to package and ship out all those orders, but hopefully we'll get going. Hello. Would you like to pick a deck to work with? Since first come, first serve. So if you want to see the Children of Litha or Ostara or the Nameless One, then we'll go ahead and draw some cards and go over their meanings. And of course, at that time, as I'm shuffling the deck, if you have any burning questions you want to ask, you go ahead and project your question into the ether webs, and we'll see what comes out. Otherwise, I'll just assume it's good information for the chat to know. So yeah, I don't know that we have anything else, just kind of general life updates, stressful times with Kickstarter orders and puppies that need potty training and kids that need attention and the holiday season coming up. So, it's stressful. It's super stressful. Plus, Pluto has recently transited into Aquarius. Everyone's talking about it, which is funny because it is a big deal. I mean, Pluto doesn't move or change signs very often, so it's kind of big when it does. But at the same time, it's a generational planet, so it's going to do things that are more like flavoring just kind of the cultural vibe, and then which house it shows up in is really where you can tell it might be influencing your outlook on certain areas of life based on what house Aquarius is for you. So that could be fun, or it could be horrible. I don't know. We'll see. Jury's out. Epic transformations are usually not fun, but can be helpful. So does anybody have a deck preference that they want to volunteer? We got kind of a shy chat this morning. Otherwise, I will just pick the Children of Ostara, probably. So, going once, going twice. All right, let's use the Children of Ostara then. We used the Nameless One a couple times in the past, so... plus, we're packaging up the Children of Ostara. It's my most recent deck. All right, hopefully this lighting is okay. Let me check something. Okay. I wanted to make sure my lighting's all right. Okay, so what does the chat need to know? Let's find out. What should we go over? What should we talk about? So mostly I just filter these through like, educational purposes. I talk about what the tarot card means, what its correspondences are, all of that good stuff. And then you can take it as it applies to you or just as a purely theoretical academic pursuit of wisdom, pursuit of tarot knowledge. Maybe I should call these tarot talks and takeaways. I do love my alliterations. All right. Okay. So we have the Nine of Coins reversed. Just a quick drop by to say hi. Have a wonderful week. Thank you so much. I appreciate you showing up. Yeah. It's been a big one. It's tiring. It's a tiring time for sure. I am exhausted. I'm sure a lot of other people are too. So we have the Nine of Coins reversed, the Ten of Swords reversed, and look at that. I was exactly expecting this card to show up, and here it is. The Four of Wands reversed. So we'll go ahead and interpret, or go over each of these cards individually as far as what they mean, and then I will demonstrate how I would put them together in a reading. So first of all, when we look at the Nine of Coins, I'll put it right ways for you to see the image better, but just remember that it's reversed because I do read with reversals. I highly recommend it. Anyway, so the thing about the Nine of Coins is that this corresponds astrologically to the Venus-ruled decan, the Venus sub-ruled decan of the zodiac sign Virgo. Now, overall, Virgo is ruled by Mercury, and Venus is actually in fall when she is in Mercury's sign of Virgo, which makes a lot of sense. Venus typically rules things like love, pleasure, beauty, luxury. She really likes to bring attention to that which brings us pleasure. And Virgo is all about distilling, excluding, finding faults, making things perfect or refined. And perfection is perhaps the ultimate foil to pleasure. If you're always looking for the perfect, you have this tendency to overlook the good, or to not be satisfied, right? Or, you'll see something with like 10 virtues and pick out the 3 flaws, as Austin Coppock says in one of his lectures in regards to Venus and Virgo. So it definitely struggles overall in Virgo. However, there is a specific decan for her, a face, a 10-degree segment within the 30-degree sign of Virgo that she really excels in. And this is Virgo's ability to do quality control, to make anything refined and beautiful and elegant, whether it's a system, a thought, a book, an art project. You do kind of need an eye for what is beautiful and pleasing and pleasurable. And Virgo, for as much as it wants things to be perfect, being beautiful and bringing pleasure is a part of the refined, perfectionistic pursuit of Virgo, or at least it can be. Particularly when we get involved with, say, I don't know, like the artist or the craftsperson or somebody who's really trying to hone and perfect a material skill. Excuse me. Still getting over my cold, it seems. But at any rate, so being able to separate yourself from the group, to look at things from an outside perspective and really nitpick, like, how can this be improved? What are its flaws? What are its strengths? What's working well? What needs to be fixed or refined? Conduct your studies that are impartial and removed from external influence. Let's not forget that Virgo, the overall sign, is linked to the Hermit in the tarot. And this is because Virgo's process are really ones that are done best when they're removed from social or outside influence. You can kind of think of Mercury overall, one of his many hats is kind of the scientist, right? And if you want to get true results, you have to make control groups and try to control your variables and make things sterile, make things removed from outside influence. So this is part of the reason why the Rider-Waite-Smith deck portrays this card as a woman standing alone in a garden with a falcon. So the falcon literally represents that keen eye that allows her to nitpick flaws or rodents and remove them swiftly from her garden. And the pursuit of perfection leaves one oftentimes perhaps materially advantaged, hence the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn's esoteric title for this card, the Lord of Pleasure. The Lord of Gain, I meant to say. My bad. The Lord of Gain is what it's called. Because yes, there is some material gain, right? There is some material benefit in perfecting something and making something as good and beautiful as it possibly can be. But Virgo, often represented by the Virgin, right, is somebody removed from influence. And so the payoff or the exchange for this pursuit of perfection, for this honing of skill or craft or maintaining of a perfect garden, is loneliness and isolation, is essentially going into that hermit energy. So a lot of times people might interpret, say, a traditional Rider Waite Smith depicted Nine of Coins as being like, financial independence, but also independence kind of necessitates loneliness, right? Being on your own, having to do it by yourself. So whether that's because you chose it or because it's just sort of something that happened to you, the Nine of Pentacles often comes up to depict situations where like we're managing on our own and we're paying a lot of attention to perfecting or honing or making something really, really nice and quality control of whatever it is we're engaged with. But we are taking the full onus of responsibility for it, good or bad. We're on our own and we're doing things the way we want to do them. So, this can be very much a card of financial gain. And that's why in the Children of Ostara, I use tulips to depict that, because I don't know if you guys know this, but it's really interesting. There's a point in history when tulips were being brought into Europe from the Middle East, and they were so wildly popular, they actually caused an economic crash, which was known as the tulip mania. Now, there's a lot of other reasons for that economic crash, but, colloquially, right, the story goes that people were so desperate to prove their financial wealth and standing. And, the Victorian language of flowers was like a big thing too. So flowers were in general imbued with a lot of meaning at that time. But they were so desperate to increase their social status by being able to buy tulips that they were selling off like portions of land and like fortunes and stuff just to have these flowers. So it's a really great kind of cultural motif, I guess, for forgetting the forest for the trees, which is something definitely that Virgo is very susceptible to already. And Venus in Virgo makes us really, really obsessive about like making things perfectly beautiful and perfectly wonderful and perfectly pleasurable. And if you are looking for perfect pleasure, you probably won't find any at all. The idea being, of course, that it's very difficult to quality control and also enjoy the process, right, of finding all these faults. I personally have my native Venus is in Virgo, and it's actually in this decan of Virgo. And yeah, I obsessively fixate over, I could draw 68 million beautiful things and I would obsessively fixate over all of the flaws in all of them. And it sometimes can be a challenge seeing the overall bigger picture when you're so focused on making sure every little piece is working as optimally as possible. Sometimes the gears just have to fit together. They don't have to shine and sparkle while they do it. But Venus in Virgo definitely wants everything to, and I have been known to say this as well, like if it must be, why can't it be beautiful? Right? The idea that even mundane objects should be beautiful or should be just that much extra, that much beyond just a mundane kind of a tool. It should be a beautiful tool, right? If it has to be here, if I have to look at it, it should be perfect and wonderful and beautiful. This was a sentiment actually shared by Art Nouveau artists, right? They often were very, how should I say, like they were interested in making things that were kind of taken for granted and re-beautifying them, right? So like Alphonse Mucha, often considered the father of the Art Nouveau movement, designed things like menus and forks and broomsticks and like really mundane objects, but would draw sketches of them as being beautiful, ornate, works of art unto themselves. And part of the principal philosophy behind the Art Nouveau movement was new art, right? Was making everything beautiful. Everything should be art, whether it's a menu or an advertisement or a fork or, of course, jewelry and, actual works of art. Everything should be really ornate and decorative and, pleasurable to behold. So that's what I think of when I look at the nine of coins, right? It's spending a ton of material resources, whether that's time, such as the case with, an artist going over their work, like 16 million years to get one piece done because they're obsessed with all of the little perfections. Whether it's the maintaining of your garden, going over and looking at every leaf for black spot or rust or vermin or parasites and trying to remove them as soon as possible. Whether it's the people of Europe, right, spending all of their material resources trying to get this perfect status symbol of the tulip. Virgo and Venus make for a kind of it has strengths, right? Don't get me wrong. And being able to quality control whatever you're doing, whether it's a performance or an art piece or just work in general, is definitely has its virtues. But you can get really hung up on it, really stuck on it, which is why Venus is generally considered in fall in Virgo. So the Nine of Coins is kind of one of those interesting cards because overall it does have a positive connotation. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn gave it the esoteric title, the Lord of Gain, like I said previously. And you do tend to get really good results when you're, quality controlling, right? When you're making sure that everything is as beautiful as it can be. But gain is not the same thing as pleasure. And when we think about the suit of coins, we're looking at the material process of something, like work or labor, learning, education, whatever it is. We're looking at shelter and food and money and the ways that we go about making it and how we go about interacting with those concepts, whether it's just to get it done or to make it beautiful or whatever. We're dealing with material issues, issues of bone, of bone and stone and dirt and time and labor and effort. These things that are created from material soil, right? From the clay, so to speak. And so when we look at this narratively, the 9 is kind of towards the end. And in Pythagorean numerology, 9 is the end because, you would get 10, you'd go 1 plus 0 is 1. And so you would start back at the beginning. In tarot, we kind of say the 10s are like the 1s, but elevated, right? It's sort of a liminal space where you're going back to the ace, but this is like actually how it turned out. But in traditional numerology, we would say, well, the 9 is already manifest. The 9 is what it is, right? So we would say, like, in the stage of production, quality control is the last actual stage. You're making sure everything turned out. You're kind of, ideally, you're doing it the entire time, but this is like the last opportunity you have to really make sure everything is as perfect as it can be because it's there, right? It's manifest. The results have happened. And then so the woman in the 9 of Coins in the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith deck, who's just like looking at her garden, looking kind of satisfied with that hawk on her hooded hawk on her arm, is very much a symbol for like, yeah, I did a good job. Like I'm sitting back and I'm, making sure, taking one final look at the garden, making sure it's all pruned and proper and nice. And and this is represented too by the falcon being hooded, right? Like we're about to be done now. It's also under her control. It's something that she can call to her will. And it represents her keen eye, her ability to like really spot an imperfection, a rodent, a rat, if you will, in the garden. So that's, the traditional thing. So in the language of flowers, the tulips also have their own particular meanings based on color. These purple tulips represent luxury, also magic, but independence, right? Purple is a royal color because it was the color of the Roman emperors and empresses. So it has in the West quite the reputation for being a color of like regality and nobility and luxury. As well as mysticism, magic, and independence, right? It's got a very mature kind of energy to it, and of course, this is further influenced by the fact that purple dyes were quite expensive, so only the very wealthy could afford purple garments, such as kings and queens. So for a long time, purple has, in the West, meant, it's sort of an elevated social status symbol, so that's what those are meant to represent. Pink often represents chaste or purity, friendliness, pleasure, but, it's also a color very commonly associated with Venus, and this is Venus's decan of Virgo. That is to say, the 10-degree segment within the sign of Virgo, subruled by Venus. That's what the 9 of Coins corresponds to. According to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which I'm really big about saying because, again, Arthur Waite and Pamela Pixie Smith, the creators of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, of which most modern tarot decks are based off of, and also Aleister Crowley, the creator of the Thoth deck, and he was a piece of work, but whatever, people like his deck, so at any rate, both of them were members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and both of them very intentionally put these correspondences into their deck. In the Thoth deck, Crowley even had the artist, Lady Freya, it says on the card, it says like Venus and Virgo in the card. You can see the glyphs for Venus and Virgo and stuff like that. It's very intentional. And so whether or not people know it, when they take inspiration from either of these two very influential decks, they are more often than not taking over the meanings and the correspondences and all of that from the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition. So a lot of times, people might say things like, oh, the astrology doesn't really matter. And to a certain extent, I mean, you don't need to use it. You can certainly get by just knowing, your own relationship with the cards, knowing what you've learned about the cards, looking at their symbols, looking at the pictures and thinking about, what that makes you think, what your subconscious mind is drawn towards. And all of that is incredibly valid. But I definitely think that you get an edge or an advantage when you really know, like, not only was this the artist's intent, but it's connected. The artist's intent was to connect us to this whole other huge wellspring of astrological knowledge, among other types of wisdom, such as numerology and things like that. So it's, it's beneficial. And it's like the more ties you can get into a card, the more ways of remembering it, the more stories attached to it, the more you have to choose from, the more your subconscious mind can kind of veer towards one or the other. So I find them to be very valuable. At any rate, when the 9 of coins is upright, we can say, oh, and then I forgot, the yellow tulips are, it's interesting because yellow flowers, so yellow represents like friendship, right? But in the Victorian era, when flowers were kind of at their height as far as being used for tools of like specific messages, if somebody was interested in a romantic partner, they would send them, let's say, I don't know, a red tulip, which represents ardent love, right? And if they responded by sending them a yellow tulip, that meant let's just stay friends. And so because of that, even because, yellow is so cheerful and friendly, it was like a polite rejection. It was like, no, you've been friend zoned. We're going to stay friends, actually. And because of that, even though it was intended to be something that was very polite and cheerful, a lot of the times yellow flowers, particularly ones that are popular in the West, such as tulips and what was the other one? Carnations are a huge one for sending messages, roses as well. Those types of flowers that you would commonly see in arrangements and stuff, the yellow ones actually are rejection. They mean things like rejection and shame and humiliation, right? Because they really mean friendship, but in the context of getting them back from after declaring your love for somebody, the feelings attached to that are, of course, shame and rejection. So this is interesting, and I put them in the 9 of coins because we are rejecting everything that isn't perfect. Right? We can deal with it and we can kind of try to make it, be whatever it's going to be, but we only want the things that are perfect. And that is part of the pitfall of the 9 of coins, right? If you're like Gordon Ramsay over here and you're sending every meal back to the kitchen because nothing meets his standards, on the one hand, you become really well known for really, really, really good things when they come out. But on the other hand, not everybody gets fed. So I don't know if I'm like watching Hell's Kitchen like 20 years too late behind the trend or whatever. But it's really interesting because during Hell's Kitchen, first of all, Gordon Ramsay has a ton of stuff in the 4th house in Virgo. Not, by the way, literally his Mars and his moon and Pluto also are all in Virgo in the 4th house. And I was totally like, dude, I bet he had a really abusive father figure, a really like explosive father figure, who made him feel like he had to be perfectionistic in the home. And this is why he feels like he has to control everything and make it so super perfect, and how it's like so tied to his like worth and his ability to be sustained and feel good or whatever, because of, Mars being right next to the moon in the 4th house in Virgo is like feeling comfortable with perfection and getting really mad when things are not perfect, which is totally what he does. And I looked it up, and Gordon Ramsay did have an alcoholic father who was probably abusive, and that probably did result in that. So I found out that he had an abusive father by looking at his birth chart, and then I checked my facts with social media. So that was very interesting. But the point is, he has a lot of stuff in Virgo. Virgo makes you very perfectionistic, as Virgo is the what is it called? The receptive principle of Mercury, right? Whereas Gemini is his projective principle. So when things are of the receptive energy, they kind of come inwards. They draw inwards, they get heavy, they get mass, they draw things towards them, they close things off. So Virgo, being an earth sign, has this like earthy, dark, receptive quality where it's kind of slowly condensing things and making things as perfect as possible. Getting a really like solid piece of perfect distilled wisdom after Gemini's brought all of the information, and gathered all of the information around. So the Venus ruled decan of Virgo is like, not only is our information perfect, but it's also beautiful and appealing and useful, and it hits all those marks. So Virgo can be difficult for Venus, but there is a place for her, and that place is quality control. And Gordon Ramsay is my example for that, because he is very publicly known for intense quality control. And then, consequently, because his Mars is also in Virgo, when they don't meet his standards, he flips out. So it's very, very interesting. But at any rate, So this was reversed, right? So when it's upright, we say, oh, we're financially independent, we're making gain, we're making progress, we're almost towards the end, quality control is going really well. We're really satisfied with what we have so far. Like, it's as close to perfect as we can make it, and we feel good about it. Of course, this is reversed, so this would signify then, like, we're, perhaps allowing our pursuit of perfection to distract us from what is good enough, what's working okay, right? What's going to get the job done and be fine. Maybe we're getting fixated on something, we're getting hung up on something, we're focusing on lack, on what needs improvement, on what isn't working so much that we're not really able to go past this stage. We're kind of getting stuck. And indeed, most times when we get card reversals, we are dealing with energies that are somehow stuck or unbalanced or not quite working. And so when that happens towards the end of a narrative journey, such as in the 9 or the 10s, with the 9s, we're really talking about not moving on into the next cycle. We're not going and starting a new material venture where we can't get past this particular one. If you think about, like in my example, right, me being an artist and me having this Venus in the Venus deck into Virgo, the Children of Ostara took me like 4 years to make, you know what I mean? And I think longer, actually. And if you count this whole Children of the Wheel series that I'm doing, where I make, I did Litha in like 2018 or something, and then Ostara is just now getting fulfilled in 2024, and I have 8 decks to go. But that's part of what my process looks like. Like, I do not want it to pass into the world until it's as perfect as I can possibly make it be. And of course, because of that, by the time I'm here, I look back on Litha and like, I love that deck, right? It was for a very long time, the Children of Litha was the absolute best thing I could produce. But when I look back on it, all I see are the faults. All I see are like, oh man, I know so much more now. The book could have been better. This could have been better. That could have been better. It's still a fine deck. Everyone says it's a fine deck, and I believe them. I thought it was the best thing I'd ever done for a couple years, but now it's like, nope, moving on. Like, that's not, I can't even look at it. You know what I mean? At least when I get in those moods, I definitely have periods where I'm like, no, this is really solid. And then I'll have periods being like, why did I ever put it out there? But, such is the way, right? That's kind of part of the, very stereotypical artist temperament. You're always trying to get better. And if you're always trying to get better, then presumably you're gaining, right? Lord of gain, you're improving. But if you're always improving, then the thing that you do next is always going to kind of overshadow the thing that you did prior. And so there is a certain bittersweetness that is very indicative of Venus in her fall, right? You can't really enjoy the pleasure because you're looking at what's going wrong. So then we can move along to the 10. So remember how I said the 9s are kind of like, you're basically there, but you're not letting things go out the gate. Like, you're not moving on to the next project. You're just kind of stuck refining and endlessly fixing and critiquing. This is a very common artist problem, by the way. I'm definitely not the only one that suffers from this, but, sometimes it can be hard for artists to know when they're done with something, because they keep finding things to improve or fix on or tweak or whatever. And so very early on, like when I was going to art school, a lot of the professors would say like, well, you're done when you really just can't stand to work on it anymore. And that's when it's just, you've done everything you can do and it's over. But there's never really, at least in my experience and in the experience of many people I know, it's difficult to find like a true sense of satisfaction once the work is complete, because like I said, like, you're improving, you're looking for things to be better, which means you're looking for things that aren't as perfect as they should be. So that can become a struggle. So when 10s, though, are reversed, 10s are definitely the process done. We can't change it anymore. It's the final card in the entire suit, right? So when 10s show up reversed, it's more just like we don't like how it ended up. We can see the results and we're not really a fan of them. And then this, of course, can lead us back to the 1 where we think, okay, well, next time, how can we make something better, right? If we're starting a new, in this case, intellectual journey, like, what have we learned so far? What can we do differently if we're going to do something similar in the future? So I'll talk a little bit about what the 10 of Swords means upright. The 10 of Swords is actually one of my favorite cards. It's super misunderstood. I know everybody likes to say that about the somewhat more serious cards in the deck, but the 10 of Swords is really one that benefits from astrological insights, and here's why. So the 10 of Swords is actually the Sun's decan of Gemini. And the legend of Gemini, right, there's these two twins. Castor and Pollux, but there are lots of twins throughout history, throughout the history of mythology that could kind of embody this duality. But essentially, one of them is immortal and one of them is mortal. And when the mortal twin dies, the immortal one is just overcome with grief and begs his father to give his immortality to his dead brother, which of course can't really be done, but Zeus, in his pity, decides to split the immortality between the two twins. So always we have a dark twin and a light twin, right? We have a twin who's allowed to walk among the living world or be in the starry heavens as the constellation Gemini, and then we have a twin that's in the underworld that has to be, there for a certain amount of time and has to be hidden. And it's really interesting because of the way that progression works. The sign of Gemini has actually shifted so that half of the sign is below the ecliptic, which is maybe responsible for that myth, or maybe it's just a fun coincidence, but literally in the constellation of Gemini, half of the twin is dark always. But the idea, right, is that we're looking at binary polarities that kind of create the ones and zeros that code the entirety of the world, right? We're looking at yes and no and black and white and, this and that and whatever. And so between these two things constantly shifting in their relationships and quantities and in their dialogues, we get kind of like this big spectrum of tons of information, right? Tons of comparative data points. Gemini is the projective sign of Mercury, so it goes out and it talks to everybody, it gets information, brings information back, kind of indiscriminately is curious and playful and kind of will humor intellectually any idea, right? It's going to chase any thread. It's going to go and look at. That's why people who have a lot of Gemini placements in their chart or have very strong Gemini placements oftentimes will be very curious and very kind of friendly and have a lot of different opinions that kind of are inconsistent, right? Gemini is always like seriously, it's like speech and debate. You can have two people just equally qualified debating the exact opposite point of view, just as logically and just as well. And Gemini is kind of like a referee being like, yeah, that sounds good. And then to the other party being like, oh, that sounds good too. And, really thinking about all of these different things and playing with the ideas, right? What does it mean if point A is true? What does it mean if point B is true? And going down the list just infinitely forever. So Gemini creates these towards the end of the suit of swords, towards the end of the air signs, right? And actually the very end of the air sign in this in this particular case. We're now done with wondering. Cause and effects have a thing, and we're going to figure out how it is, and then there's no more questions, right? We've already got it figured out. 10 means ending. 10 means a death. In the intellectual suit of swords, this is the death of thought. This is the death of words. This is no more thinking about it, no more talking about it, no more wondering about it. It's done. It's over. We have our answer, right? I always like to say the death of a question is its answer. So when we get the 10 of swords, it's like, yeah, okay, so it's overkill, right? We've explored every avenue intellectually. We've thought about all the things that could be or could not be. Let's remember too, like the card right before this is the 9 of swords, where we're kept up late at night with anxiety. And what is usually the cause of that? Always wondering, right? Will it go wrong? If it goes wrong, how will it go wrong? If that happens, how will I fix it? Can I fix it? Or am I just doomed? Like all of these questions that come to an anxious mind are the result of not knowing, of not feeling sure that they know what the outcome is going to be and what their role and agency are and as far as navigating where they want it to be, what they want it to be. So when we get the 10 of swords, it's like the sun breaking through the darkness of night, right? It's like there's clarity now. So whether or not we like the answer, we have an answer, right? The light twin is coming to us now, and we can put aside our ambiguity and our questions and our, anxieties. At the very least, we know now, so we don't have to worry about it anymore. So it's very common, like, for example, let's say you're turning to the tarot because you're worried that your partner is cheating on you, right? That's like a very stereotypical meme-based kind of question. But it's still one that happens and that people want to know about. And, let's say you get the 10 of swords. It's like, well, for better or worse, like you're going to find out. Like this is your answer. You'll have your answer and you'll know. Whether they were faithful or they were not faithful, that's a different kind of vibe. But either way, your question will be answered when you get to the bottom of it. And the 10 of swords is scary only insofar as the answer is displeasing. but the whole point of being this far along the suit of swords is that, you don't have to agonize over wondering anymore. It's just done. This is why the swords are piercing his the skull, right? Because it's like we're putting an end to it. We're not asking any more questions. This is also the Japanese spider lily. It is commonly represents death in Japan and is said to like guide souls onto their path to reincarnation, because it's like whatever problems or misgivings you've had with this lifetime is over and we're starting a new cycle, right? The card after the 10 is the ace. We're starting new questions, new intellectual thoughts, new queries, whatever, new pursuits. And it's just, we have to move on. We're done with this. So of course, when this is reversed, we have either it, but you don't like it, or we have this kind of like, well, since you're able to kind of start to move on a little bit, kind of get it over with. It's not quite as emotionally charged. Some people might also tell you to look, if the card is reversed, to look to the card before it, which is a fun way of looking at it. But if you look to the card before it, you're at the nine of swords. So a lot of the times, sometimes when this card appears, it can be like, oh, you don't want to let go. You don't want to move on. So you're still kind of fixated on like what ifs, what could happen. You're still a little bit in that 9 of swords energy. And so even though, let's say, a situation has come to an end because the 10 is here, and even though you would like to move past it, you're still kind of thinking about it a little bit. So there's a couple different ways to interpret it. Some people will just say that the reversals are like, an antithetical sort of application. I don't agree with that. I mean, by that logic, it would be the 10 of swords is like the answering of a question, and the reverse 10 of swords is, I don't know, is like, well, actually, I have heard a lot of people say, like when I was first studying tarot, I heard that the 10 of swords is like, what is it? Like, a lot of people would, or maybe that was more the 3 of swords, honestly, but a lot of people would say things like, oh, when the sword suits are turned reverse, it's like the swords are falling out and people are moving on. And while I think that might be a good interpretation for the 3 of swords, which puts you back to the 2 of swords, I kind of tend to think of it like, when the card is reversed, I prefer looking at it like we're still stuck with the previous card's energy, or we're holding on to it, or it's out of balance, it's not quite working. So if we go with the lens of like, oh, the 10 of swords reversed means something is out of balance, we can say, well, either you have decided to stop thinking about this prematurely and it's not over, and you still could actually make a couple changes or think about things, or there's more yet to be discovered, or we say you're obsessively fixated on the possibility that that's the case, but really it's like it's over and you need to move on. And then mostly my advice is when you work with reversals is to kind of experiment with it for a little while and see what it tends to indicate. Like ask questions that you'll have answers to in so far into the future, and then check your work, right, and see like what did that card end up meaning, like how was it kind of manifested, and also to be thinking about the cards next to it, right? So I'll go ahead and tell you how I would interpret this card in context of the spread after we talk about the last card. But my inclinations, particularly with the suit of swords, but kind of generally with reversals, is like, well, first of all, the energy is not balanced. It needs to be thought of in some kind of different way, reintegrated in some other way. It's either too much or too little, right? Because that's what out of balance means. Secondarily, I think, okay, so the card before it. You look to the card before it, that's going to show you where you got kind of knotted up, and then you'll be able to move on and implement this new energy more effectively. That's usually my MO, but people have different methods of reading with reversals, just like they have different methods of reading in general. So, experiment with it and see what you like the best. So anyways, and then we're dealing with the 4 of Wands. So this is a, also, hello, somebody wrote some comments, but they're not in English. So I don't know what you're saying, but hi, and thank you for being here. Anyway, so the 4 of Wands corresponds to the Venus ruled decan of the zodiac sign Aries. Now, Aries is ruled by Mars, and Venus tends to struggle in Mars-ruled signs. She's actually considered to be in exile or detriment when in the signs of Aries and Scorpio. So not totally unlike this, where this was her fall, which is a bit different, but still not great. And this is her exile, so still not awesome for Venus. Well, so as we've discussed, Venus is a planet of love, beauty, pleasure, things that are valuable and that are pleasing, that harmonious, right? Whether it's her social aspect of Libra, which is like social beauty, i.e., harmony and justice, or whether it's her more earthy, sensual nature in Taurus, where it's like material pleasure or food and luxury and comfy pillows, that kind of thing. Venus is all about what's good, what feels good, what looks good, what is good. That's what Venus's whole thing is about. In the sign of Aries, we're dealing with a Mars ruled sign, which means it's very much about conflict and battle and conquest and domination. And at the very best, like Mars definitely has some redeeming qualities. For example, Mars controls things like valor and courage, bravery, right? The ability to stand up and advocate for yourself and others is also a Martian thing. So it's not like he's all violence and domination and conquest all the time, but that definitely is in his wheelhouse and it's where he tends to shine. Mars is really like the warrior archetype, and warriors are really good at destroying. That's kind of their whole thing. So even though you can do something noble, like for example, destroy a tyrant king, right? You can go in and be a protester. You can be a courageous fighter for the disenfranchised. You can do all those things, but the fundamental principle of Mars is that it's a destructive force, right? So Venus, planet of love and beauty and harmony, wants to kind of bring things together and make things nice and pleasurable. And Mars is very much aware of conflict. It's like when your goals are at the cost of somebody else, they're in conflict with either someone else or the environment or the situation or whatever. Mars is the ability and the need to fight for any reason, but to fight. Can also be like competition, I suppose, would be another sort of less kind of malicious way for that influence to take part, sanctioned, friendly competition. But Mars has a tendency to really get the blood pumping. It's the fight or flight reflex, right? So Venus in this sign, imagine somebody trying to make harmony and make beauty and make love, and you're in a situation where fight and flight becomes super necessary, right? Where you're kind of really wrestling with that. So Venus has this really wonderful ability to turn any situation she's in into something that's not completely awful. Even when she's suffering and in detriment and exile, she has this tendency to want to make things beautiful. And in the Mars ruled sign of Aries, sometimes this means turning a battlefield into a raging party or like a frat house, you know what I mean? It can be getting up all that like really high energy, the loud, the self-assertion, and turning it into something festive and something explosive, but in a fun way. Venus can also in this decan be about turning things that are really let's say destructive into something that ultimately serves pleasure or harmony, or for the means to bring about something that is well here. So Austin Coppock points out in one of his, I don't remember exactly which this is. I think it might be his lecture about decans in general. But one of the visual pictures he uses for this decan, or maybe it's in his book 36 Faces, I don't remember, but I'm sure that he was the one that used this image. But there's a famous picture of a hippie putting a rose inside the barrel of a gun from I think from the Vietnam protests, if I'm not mistaken, is where that picture was from. And he used that example for like this decan of Venus, right, where it's like people are having really intense, very potentially violent situations, and Venus is going there trying to be like, well, we need to focus on love, right, and harmony and unity, and so the idea of the hippie putting a flower inside the barrel of a gun is very like a Venusian way to kind of combat Mars, right? Because Venus can combat Mars with the things that she has, which of course are things like beauty and harmony and pleasure. So reminding people about those things that tend to unify us, unite us versus destroy us. But in this decan, more often than not, I really see it coming into like, parties, anniversaries, weddings. Weddings are a really great example for this card because like, I'm not going to say marriage is a battle, but it definitely is not the end of the journey. When you get married, that's the celebration where you're like, oh, yay, this is our future together and we're celebrating and this is so great. But it's really kind of also seen as sort of like your last big hurrah before you undergo the enormous struggle of maintaining a union with another person, no matter what happens, right? Love, death, sickness, whatever. And so it's not like it's a battle, but it's kind of a struggle a lot of the time. And And so you're sort of like celebrating this, these moments of freedom and these moments of being single, right? Before you're united in purpose with another person for better or worse. Similarly, graduation ceremonies, or like if you get out of school and you throw a party because you graduated, that's not the end of your journey. You still have to go out into the world and enter the workforce or go to higher education or whatever it is you're going to do. But oftentimes we take time and celebrate how far we've already come, right? Or I always think of that saying, drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die, right? It's like the celebrating before you go off to war, or getting married before you go off to war. This idea that we know that the future has all of these really long, arduous hardships and struggles and conflicts. So we take the time to celebrate and be grateful for the things that we have while we have them, while we can do them. In a way, I've also heard it said, if Mars is war, then Venus is the spoil of war, right? If Mars is like destruction and chaos and these really like fight or flight invoking kinds of situations, then Venus is like, well, let's celebrate now, because right now in this very moment, we're safe and we're together, and that's worth celebrating, even though we know that that might not be the case even an hour from now, a week from now, a year from now, whatever. So the Venus ruled decan of Aries is really this like celebrate right now because you don't know what the future holds, right? It turns this kind of fight or flight energy into something that is fun and festive and celebratory. It definitely has a tendency to do that. So my kid is playing in the other room, and it's very distracting. Anyway, so if I was going to read this as a whole, I'm like, okay, well, the holidays are coming, and I don't know about you guys, but I very much am in this situation where nothing quite is coming out perfectly. I'm like way behind on my horoscopes, for example. I have a Patreon. I'm trying to do all of these rewards for my Patreon followers, which, by the way, if you're interested in supporting me, please go over to Patreon and check it out. But at any rate, there's like a lot of stuff to do, and then there's stuff to do around the house, and then all my family's coming, and we're going to have like this 22-person party that's going to be really intense. And I don't really like big groups of people. I'm kind of more introverted. So I'm thinking that's not going to be fun. And let's remember that the four of wands shows up reversed. That's like an obligatory party, or a party where you're trying really hard to be pleasurable and diplomatic and harmonious, but it's difficult because there's a lot of Martian energy, right? There's a lot of like angry people with different opinions, all trying to say, quote unquote, diplomatically what they think, and you have to sit there and grin and bear it, right? Those are the kinds of situations that I often see the four of wands reversed show up for. It's like you're at a party or you're at a gathering, a group event of some kind, because Venus is very social, and it's not going well, or you don't want to be there, or it feels very stressful because Mars, right? So it's more like Mars is kind of winning that unique alchemy that goes into this decan's chemistry, right? That unique mixing. It's like there's a little too much Mars in this and not quite enough Venus. It's not feeling very good. It's feeling a little bit tense. So obligatory parties are parties you don't want to go to. And then, of course, the nice 10 of Swords being like, well, you can't stop thinking about it, right? Like, it's over. It's too late. If we're doing this, in my opinion, or in my perspective, I guess I should say, like, I've already committed to going to this family gathering. I have already committed to several things down the line that are now becoming a little overwhelming. So it's like, I know the answer, but I'm still not over lamenting about it. I'm not over talking about it. I'm not over being like, oh, why did I do this? The 10 of Swords, I think, when it shows up reversed, usually indicates a situation where we do know the answer. It has, in fact, happened, but we're just not done griping about it, right? Or wondering or bemoaning, why did this happen to me? Why did it have to be like that? None of those answers actually matter, because it is what it is, and we have to go with the information we have going forward in the direction that now we're going, because things have already happened. The 10 has been laid, right? There, you can't go past 10. It goes back to ace. So, worrying and fixating or having kind of that 9 of Swords energy, even though you already have your answer, is essentially a waste of time. But it's difficult to tell that to somebody, even yourself, right? Like it's just kind of part of the process sometimes. It's not maybe helpful, but just something that kind of needs to happen. And then, yeah, so this card spread very clearly, I think, spells out at least my holiday perspective. I think a lot of people sort of start to feel that holiday fatigue, it's particularly because, we don't all celebrate. We don't all feel like we have a lot to celebrate. And, it's just, it's hard enough to like live a normal day without making time to like spend a bunch of money on charcuterie boards and sit around with your uncles and cousins and grandparents and parents who all have their own weird opinions, and then worry about how that's going to come up and what you're going to do when that happens. And meanwhile think about all the quality control issues that aren't as perfect as they could be at home because everything keeps piling up and nothing keeps getting done, right? So these cards together definitely speak to me about situations like that. And I think that the holiday seasons are really prone to breed situations like that. So, I'm a Ten of Swords Gemini, and it's answered so many questions. Yeah, I'm glad that that illuminates some things. But yeah, the Ten of Swords is great because it's like the Sun's decan of Gemini. It's like bringing clarity to all of those questions. Now, what that brings to you emotionally is a totally different story. Of course, if you have a lot of very strong Gemini placements, the emotions might not be the forefront of the thing, right? Like Geminis are marked by being inquisitive and curious and talking to people, talking with people, debating, so it's more like engaging with the intellect in a very social way, in a very projective way. So it's kind of funny. I mean, like one of the things that Geminis are most often criticized for is like this, like being quote unquote two-faced, which is really just quite reductionist and kind of wrong. It's not that they're two-faced. It's that they genuinely are willing to like think about a thing as though they were like wholeheartedly in agreement with that thing, follow that train of thought, and then also think about the opposite thing, right? They're gathering data. It's not personal. It's not like they, when they said, oh, I can see that this makes sense this way. They're not saying they agree with you and they never did say that, right? It's more just like, yeah, I can see how that might be. But it's different, I think, for like, I have a couple Gemini people that I am in contact with. And also I have Mars in Mars's decan of Gemini. So there's definitely this very like energetic, passionate pursuit of like collecting all the information and all the data and looking at everything and getting really fired up about it, for me because Mars is there. But for other people, it might be more impartial of a pursuit. But anyway, yeah, exactly. We can see all the sides, right? It's kind of like, so, and it's so funny because air signs in general are pretty good at intellectually analyzing things, but the process is different. So like Libra, for example, can see all sides, but it's cardinal, and so they want to lead people in what they perceive to be the most harmonious direction. So they're going to accommodate or compromise to try to get things going where they want, which is, because it's ruled by Venus, the pursuit of social harmony. So justice or fairness is something where everybody is as satisfied as they can be. Things are fair, right? And so Libra, being cardinal, will try to take that and push it in the direction that they perceive is best. Aquarius, being fixed, already has their mind made up, but they are still willing to go and like think about things, particularly from outside of the box, because they're, we don't really have to get too far into that. We'll save it for a time when Aquarius actually shows up, but it's fixed air, right? So it's fixed thought. So not only are they on the outside looking in, but they're also pretty stuck in their course because they're maintaining whatever it is that the cardinal sign of Libra kind of brought. But Geminis are mutable. So they're like, how do we end the process of intellectualization, right? Which is making sure all of our bases are covered, all of the due diligence is done. We've looked into every possible avenue. We've asked enough questions about how this is going to work, right? It's ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is a scientist and a tinkerer and a magician and a trickster and a storyteller and all of these things where, the end is only as good as the next beginning. You know what I mean? Like, we're always looking for new information. And that's kind of the fundamental process of Gemini. It can be inconsistent, it's mutable, but it's inconsistent because it's like, well, we're looking at everything, right? We're looking at everything, we're gathering everything. And unlike Libra, which already has a cardinal direction it's trying to end up in, Gemini doesn't have exactly a cardinal direction it's trying to end up in. It's just changing things up because it's mutable, it comes at the end. So once we're done with Aquarius's fixed thought, then it goes on to Gemini, like, okay, well, that's that. Now what's the next thing? So lots of questions for Gemini, and they have such an amazing curiosity that really is quite an advantage. But I think that in interpersonal relationships, it tends to upset people because a lot of people, particularly if they have a lot of fixed or cardinal signs, if they have a lot of cardinal signs in their chart, they want people who will follow them because they're leaders. They're cardinal, right? That's what they want. And people who are fixed, they want somebody that they know is like, are you with me or are you against most to me, you know, and Gemini is being mutable, same to an extent with Virgo and Pisces and Sagittarius, the other mutable signs. They're not very good at committing because their whole thing is changing stuff up. So if you want somebody to lead you faithfully, or if you want someone to stand with you faithfully, that's not necessarily what those signs are best at. They can do it. I mean, and everybody is a very complex alchemy of all kinds of different influences. So of course, somebody who has a lot of Gemini placements, but then also has, say, I don't know, a Taurus moon or something, that person might be more fixed or more stable. But generally speaking, the essence of Gemini is to, you know, to change with the wind, right? To chase a thing, chase a lead, right? Like be the reporter chasing the lead wherever it goes, or being the scientist and following the evidence regardless of whatever hypothesis, right? Not being loyal to a preconceived idea of what is, and actually exploring and coming up with questions and answers and all of these different things. So, and yes, the reason why it ends with the Ten of Swords is because it can be kind of overloaded a little bit. It can get overkill. Sometimes there are too many questions. At a certain point, we need to end the experiment. We need to end the news article. We have to end the pursuit of the knowledge. We're done with it, right? We just have to move on. So that's kind of what we're working with there. So yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting because usually when I do these readings for the holidays, it's always like kind of a mixed bag. And it's always like, well, we're trying to celebrate and have fun, but lots of stuff we're kind of still hung up about that we're not quite satisfied with, and nothing is quite perfect, especially in the holiday season. You know, everybody has this very specific idea of what it should be like or what it should feel like or how it should go down. Or maybe I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people do. And it can be, if you're always looking at like how it should be perfect, it's always going to be disappointing. It's never going to really live up to the reality, because overall, maybe you do have a really nice, maybe a really nice dinner, but like, you know, you can't expect everybody all the time to be perfect either. Like somebody makes an off-color joke and somebody else is really offended. And like, maybe that doesn't totally kill the party, but if you're fixated on how that kind of like ruined this perfect moment, then you'll never realize that, like, well, maybe the moment wasn't horrible though. I mean, everybody showed up and nobody started a fist fight, right? Like there's probably some good qualities about it as well. Of course, I don't know your life. Maybe not everybody showed up and a lot of people started fist fights. I don't know. But yeah, expectations definitely run high. Exactly. Thank you. Yeah. That can be a big problem with the holiday season, and I definitely think it's one that is indicated by this spread as a whole. So if you were asking a question into the cards, like how's this going to go down, and actually I was kind of thinking like, oh, I wonder what these next couple of weeks are going to be like. I was like, well, that seems like it's answering that question anyway. But yeah, so if anybody has any questions or comments or wants to ask anything, and I think that's good. I was going to do a little very brief coin reading because I thought that could be fun. Oh, excuse me. I'm no longer sick, but I do still have that kind of like dry throat a bit, and I like to put on incense, and it really makes my throat itchy when I'm coming off of a cold. Anyway. Oh, and I had the weirdest dream last night. Not that I expect anybody to care about that in particular, but it was really weird. I dreamt that I wrote a version of like the Children of the Wheel or the Children of Litha or something book, but I wrote it in a language that was apparently original and like true, but that nobody could understand. And everybody was really mad at me. And so I took myself out of existence over it, and then went through this weird like Alice in Wonderland journey thing, trying to like get back to the world of the living so that I could just correct the mistake instead of freaking out about it. It was so odd. It was just so weird. And there were like these video game tactics almost. Like I had to defeat all of these like, I don't know, zombie creatures that were all running towards me, but I was getting like totally swamped or overwhelmed by them. And I kept getting like sent back to start kind of. And then I finally figured out that I wasn't supposed to like attack everything head on. I was supposed to try to like kind of wait and like be more strategic or whatever. It was a weird dream. But it definitely was not fun. Since I'm not real excited to look into 2025, it feels like all of the years are holding each other's beers. It totally does feel like that. Yeah, I agree. These I feel like honestly since 2020 I've had just no, like they all blur together. It just feels like the same long thread of weird. Like somehow 2020 and we all shifted into some alternate worse reality where everything was just like a little bit worse, and like it keeps doing that every year. I don't know. It's very odd. I've been having weird dreams lately, but then dreams that I don't quite remember. I only like remember a little bit about it. I hate that kind of thing. Okay, so I wanted to do a couple little coin readings. I really love reading with my divination coins. That was kind of one of my favorite ideas, to be honest. So there are these things called witches runes, and I really liked them, but I didn't like how like plain and simple they were because I'm, you know, extra like that. So when I designed my coins to go along with each Kickstarter, I ended up doing things that also could coincide with this witches rune system, or was kind of loosely inspired by that system. But then, you know, I put my own little mark on it. So I do have a couple extra coins and stuff, but like the eye is a symbol that's in the witch's runes, and so is the heart. So I have that. And, you know, flight was also one. And so was, this is rings from the witch's rune set. You know, they have the sun and the moon. So I have those. And then I kind of added this. They have scythe and harvest, but I put a new face on them, you know, like I do. And then this hare and fox was originally there to kind of be like receptive and projective, right? Because the original set has male and female witches runes, which I think are not necessarily unhelpful. But I also thought like, well, you know, people can overlay that onto other things like the sun and the moon or the fox and the hare if they want. But really what we're talking about is more of like, you know, projective or receptive, right? Like you're going out and you're hunting, or you're being receptive to the cues of the environment and reacting to what's going on. So I decided to do that instead. I thought it would kind of maybe cover a little bit more, and also sort of not be beholden to like more traditional gender roles, which I think some people can get a little bit hung up on sometimes. I don't think that they're horribly useless to consider as far as esoteric systems go, because they tend to show up in a lot of older systems, because it's, you know, it's like a very obvious thing you can observe that happens in nature and in culture. And so it's easy to overlay a lot of like symbolic meaning onto that. And, you know, but like symbols and metaphors, they're only useful insofar as they're helpful and they like explain things and make things clearer. If they confuse more than they explain, I don't know, then it maybe not be as relevant to you. So I kind of made it a little bit less specific. And then we have the star and the crossroads. So I'm pretty happy with how these turned out, but I'm going to go ahead and just do a general reading. I like to sometimes read with one gold set and one silver set, which is fun, but I'm just going to do gold for now. So this is how you shuffle them. Okay. So we have the collective, and I don't know, you can't really see that, but let me see. There it is. So we have the moon ended up in the collective section. So this is going to be like our peers, group events, organizations, the moon representing something that is receptive and private and hidden. And of course, as we're entering the holiday season, people are going to be wanting to spend time with by themselves or with close friends and family. So the collective is focusing on more intimate, private things. Over here, way past the collective, but still, I don't know if you can really see that, still kind of a part of it, is the crossroads. Whenever these things end up being around these corners, I read that as like it's a subconscious factor, but it's not really at play right now. So the crossroads is being like, we all collectively, because it's apart from the collective, we're kind of at a crossroads here. We don't really know where to go. We're sort of stuck in the labyrinth. And in light of that, we're still trying to like hold on to what's important and needs to be nurtured and protective. But as a collective, this is becoming less and less clear, and we're kind of all lost inside this labyrinth, which is a little bit difficult to deal with. And the subconscious mind, over here we have subconscious, and we have the alchemical heart and the glyph for fire. I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of, sorry about this is a bit of a big spread. Anyway, so this is fire and this is heart. So yeah, subconsciously we're all really passionate and inflamed about things for various degrees. I think it's really interesting because like I try not to talk too much about politics on this kind of stuff, because that's really not what my lives are like for. It's about the divination tools and giving you the tools to do the tarot things, you know, giving you the tools to do your divination and your magic however
you want to do them as well as you can. But I will say that I was really struck by no matter who I talk to, and in my family, we have some very dividing lines, not in my personal family, but basically as a cliff note, everyone on my dad's side is incredibly conservative Republican-ish, and everyone on my mom's side is like incredibly liberal, like blue Democratic or whatever, which in America, for whatever reason, is apparently the only thing you can be, is totally one or totally the other, no matter what happens. I don't know. It's bonkers. Anyway, the point is though, so it was really interesting because this election, it seemed like both people were like, yeah, no matter what happens, everyone's going to be really upset. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, probably. I mean, that's usually what happens in American politics, but it seemed particularly so. Anyway, I think everybody's really inflamed and self-righteous about their opinions and their feelings right now, and that makes it kind of difficult for us to work together. And maybe the reason why we're stuck in this labyrinth. There's a lot of really strong feelings coming from subconscious and emotional places that get really fired up. And so as we're trying to protect and nurture collectively, this becomes a little bit difficult with these subconscious, really inflamed emotions, really passionate things, for better or for worse. It's really interesting too to consider that like passion originally in like Latin, the Latin version of passion, like when people say the passion of Christ, right? Passion was like a suffering inflicted on you, like a madness, like love as a passion was seen as like destroying otherwise very sensible marriages, right? Very sensible land-based, alliance-based marriages. And then people would fall in love and they would become overcome by passion and it would, devour their senses, which was seen as a negative thing. So originally when people talk about passion in like old texts and why Mars sometimes rules passion is because it's a thing that takes away all of your senses and makes you crazy, basically. And sometimes that can be exciting and exhilarating, but like think about how many of those really passionate love stories end in like, the unalivement of both characters, right? For lack of better words. It sometimes is like overcomes people to such an extent that it's really detrimental because it's not only blocking out things like logic and reason, which since the Enlightenment period have been a bit overblown but are nevertheless very important, it also blocks out our ability to like actually connect with each other because we're so lost in this like very self-indulgent feeling of like intensity. And I will argue, like, as somebody who is kind of a passionate person, like it has its virtues, sure. I mean, people who are impassioned are very bold and courageous and like Mars like in a good way, right? But I think that like any fiery element, it does have a tendency to kind of grow out of control and consume everything, the senses, the relationships you make, burn bridges, right? Whatever. I mean, we think about people who are like really passionately in love with somebody that is bad for them or somebody who compels them to make unwise decisions and how it just can quite frankly kind of ruin a life. Or at least be pretty damaging to it. It can like make it so that they don't talk to friends or family anymore. They do something crazy like run away and go to a different state with like no plans and no provisions, no support. I mean, sometimes these things end up working out for the better, which is great, but a lot of the times they don't. So it's really like fire is fire, you know what I mean? Like all the fiery stuff, it can be wonderful. It can be used to light your hearths and light your candles and make you warm and cook your food. And, fire is an amazing tool when you can harness it. But if it gets out of control, it's incredibly destructive. And passion is one of those things that can get out of control really easily. So it's interesting. I mean, everything ultimately is kind of a double-edged sword. Anything when it's drawn to extremes can be very detrimental. But it is kind of funny how in like modern terms, passion is always a good thing, or at least very often is a good thing. But back in the day, like back in when they were still writing books in Latin, passion was like not a good thing. So it's funny how those cultural perceptions shift. Anyway, in exchange, we have flight and we have, what is this? Oh, the air element. Nice. So we might be talking about exchange a lot. This makes sense. Most people have gift-giving holidays coming up, so you might be, rushing off to do your shopping, to talk to your neighbors, talk to your local businesses or whatever, have a lot of fun. This is also harvest here, and then the projective fox, right, the predator. So you might be like on the hunt for your harvest, going out and getting your thing, talking to your people. This is also because it's like bordering on, these two are in relationship. The harvest and the fox are in relationships, and the flight and the element for air are in exchange. So it's like, yeah, you know, you're exchanging ideas, exchanging a lot of thoughts and opinions and feelings with the people around you. Maybe not feelings because it's air, but you know, thoughts and opinions, ideas. Um, and there is some kind of liberation or some kind of fun, uplifting flight through that. The other thing too is that flight can also be about, you know, the flight of ideas or the exchanging of ideas already. That's why it's a crow here, because crows are incredibly intelligent and they also have a very elaborate, specific way of communicating within their family groups. And so it is like, you know, our ability to communicate and work together can liberate us from the yoke of material oppression, by which I mean like you can get a lot more done working with somebody, right? You know, in the case of civilization, you can like build civilization with a group of people, but you really probably can't even really build a house with just yourself. You know, you need people to help you. Many birds use family setups and stuff. Not all, but crows do, and sparrows do, and a lot of other ones. Anyway, so flight is also about travel. Travel and exchange, communication, like how words travel. That's literally how we talk, is we travel ideas from one person to another. But like it can be physical or intellectual travel. And since we have the air sign right here, it's like either travel by air, travel far away to engage in some kind of exchange. Also, it could literally just be like, you know, talking with people about your ideas and stuff like that. And then there's some kind of like, if you go get it, you have a lot of harvest to reap. So the fox is somebody who's clever, projective. In the nameless one, I link it to the magician tarot. So it's definitely like there's harvest to be had in your relationships for going out and getting what you want, or going out and doing the things you think are good to do. A lot of rewards to be collected. And then on the mundane, the very basic, most mundane level, like I said, there's some gift giving holidays where like, yeah, we're going to go out and look for things to give to people that we care about, right? And make sure everyone's holiday harvest is as bountiful as possible, which of course, going back to my other tarot reading, can be incredibly stressful and difficult because, especially if you're dealing with kids, I've got 2 young kids and their expectations for Christmas are like so high. And I'm like, dude, like realistically, when you play with these toys, like, I don't know, once and then they break or you ignore them and then they're just clutter. And it's like, there's these really high expectations that just, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder. Anyway, not to be pessimistic about it. I'm sure it'll also be a lot of fun, but holidays are stressful. There's let's not forget, as we go into the holiday season, that people who are struggling with situations likely will, I don't know how to say this. Things that are already hard get a lot harder for a lot of people during this time of year. So try to be sensitive and try to bring comfort where you can. Life is a struggle for everybody, and everyone's doing the best with what they have. So I know it's difficult to keep and maintain one's sense of humanity in a world that seems quickly, I don't know, depleted of it. But you know, if you want more good, then we have to be more good, right? Not to be cliche, but you know, be the change you want to see in the world and all of that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you guys are really enjoying these Wednesday lives, you can like, subscribe, leave comments. That's all very helpful. Or you can also go check me out on Patreon. We have a lot of fun rewards there, and I have to get going to finish up the horoscopes for that. Actually, I'm still working on those. They take a lot longer than I expect them to every time. Anyway, so thank you so much for being here, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.